Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar on cannabis banking and predatory lending. We have a great group of panelists and a great set of questions that we put together from the attendees and some stuff that we created from the New York City Committee. So we're going to get started, and I'm just going to make the introductions. First, we'll go through the moderated Q&A, and then we'll have a chance to do some Q&A afterwards. If you do have any questions, please put it into the Q&A chat as well. All right, we're going to start with Michael from Valley. So Michael, you please introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and about Valley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Moran. I run the compliance piece of the cannabis banking program here at Valley. Valley started this program about 3 years ago. We're one of the very few national banks that bank the cannabis industry. And we bank customers in 27 states as of today. We're always looking to expand, and we are headquartered in New Jersey, but New York and New Jersey are our footprint. So we're very happy to be on this call here so that we can kind of give you guys some information and help you guys out in your process. Valley's been around nearly 100 years. We're a $68 billion bank. We're looking to be in this for the long term. So this is not just a fly-by-night operation where we're not going to be here for you for the extended period that you guys are involved in cannabis, and we're looking to grow with you through this process. So these information sessions are very helpful. We know banking is a very complex piece of the pie here, and we want to make sure we're giving you the information so you guys can be successful when you're starting off in the early days of this process in New York. So pleasure to meet everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here.
All right, thanks. Next, we have Jason Almeida from Ponce.
Good afternoon, Jason Almeida, Vice President, BSAML Officer and Security Officer for Ponce Bank. Ponce Bank's been around since 1960, began as a community bank in South Bronx. We're sort of headquartered in the Bronx. We're now a public company, just roughly about $2.5 billion in asset. We entered cannabis banking just about last year. We began with helping individuals with the pre-licensing requirements and having them, helping them with the process of applying for the licenses with New York State. And we have, begun banking licensed entities. We are mostly within the New York City region. Main reason we enter the space is really a lot of it had to do with the social equity side. A lot of those were our clients, small businesses that were trying to start up, that were impacted by the war on drugs and how the social equity program from OCM was going to come down. And a lot of them were already our clients anyway, so we didn't want them walking out the door. And similar to Valley, this is something that we're looking for in the long run. We understand the opportunity for both those individuals obtaining their licenses and the bank itself to just build out those relationships and continue to assist our community.
Great, thank you. This is Diana House from AmeriCU Credit Union.
Hi, I'm Diana. I am the BSA and Fraud Manager for AmeriCU Credit Union. I do also have our specialty banking and our security, our physical security. So our specialty banking program is our cannabis program. We did just jump on board with that last fall. So we just started onboarding accounts. We have been building our program for about a year, and we got into this to help those businesses in our community because we do know there's not many financial institutions banking cannabis accounts currently. So we did start onboarding accounts back in October, and we do have a lot of cultivators in our area. We are in the central and northern New York part of New York State.
Great, thanks. And this is Bart, and he is from Harris Beach Law, and to speak about predatory lending.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bart Ketchai. I am an attorney at Harris Beach. My office is here in Rochester, New York, but we do have offices throughout the state, which gives us a good opportunity to represent and assist companies like yours. I've been here since 2021, and we've had a cannabis industry team the entire time. Not only can we help with banking needs, we're also happy to help with general corporate and commercial needs, which is generally where I come in. Prior to Harris Beach, I have 15 years of experience in that area. So, here to help and here to talk about predatory lending as well as some of the other topics that I think we're going to discuss today. Happy to add my insight to it, and thank you for having me.
Thank you all. So we're going to go on to the moderated questions. We're going to start off with just the daily banking. These are some of the questions that we created from the attendees. And also, if you have any other additional questions, again, like I said, put it in the Q&A and we can answer it at the end of the conversation. All right, so let's just get started. What are the, and any of you can jump in at any time to kind of answer these questions. So it don't have to be any specific person. Like Bart, you did have something to add to it. You're welcome to add to that. So what are the difference for state chartered credit union versus a federally chartered credit union doing business in the marijuana industry? Are there deferral credit union cannabis at this time?
I can touch base on that. We are a state chartered credit union. So for us to get into the marijuana industry, we had a lot of conversations with New York State Department of Finance or Department Financial Services. Sorry about that. They are our main regulators. So we had conversations with them to ensure they were on board with us banking cannabis accounts. For federal credit unions, since they are chartered by the NCUA is cannabis friendly. Have they come out with any strict regulations yet? No, but I think the second part of this question is asking if there's federal credit unions banking cannabis. And as of right now, I do not know of any, but I don't know if anybody else does.
Okay. And so second question, what kind of financial institution should people in the cannabis industry in New York be looking for?
Well, if I can just chime in on that first one very quickly, I think my three co-panelists can chat on this as well. I think any institutional bank or financial institution that is either state chartered or federal chartered does have to consider the tension that exists right now between the federal law and the state law here in New York. So, as everyone knows, the marijuana is still a tier 1 drug federally. And so any business, whether it's a bank or any other service provider that is considering doing business with a cannabis company, has to take that risk into consideration. And it looks like that risk is becoming less and less of a concern as we get closer and closer to things that change federally. But I just want everyone to understand the tension when it does arise, whether you're talking to a bank or any other service provider about doing business with your company.
Yeah, and Vanessa, can I just add a little to that too?
Sure,
I know this was specific to credit unions. However, Valley is a federally chartered national bank, and we did a similar thing as Diana had mentioned. We spoke to our regulators, which are the OCC, and being a federally chartered bank, we're dealing with the feds, and cannabis is legal federally, right? We took the step to make sure they understood that we are vetting every dollar that comes into the bank to show that it's tied to a legal sale. We do it through systems where we tap into the POS or seat to sale system, so we can show and account for every single dollar that comes into the bank to show it is tied to a sale according to the state regulations. So New York has certain regulations, Jersey, Pennsylvania, they all have different regulations, and we make sure that every transaction is done in accordance with those regulations. So the person has to be of age, it has to be done by a licensed employee within store hours, all sorts of things like that. And we make sure to check every single transaction, not just overall, everything that comes through is vetted and confirmed. And that way the regulators were comfortable with us. I won't say they told us we could do it, but they were comfortable with the fact that we were taking these steps and conducting the due diligence in the way we did it, so that we can continue to bank these customers. And we've done 2 OCC exams and we haven't had an issue yet. So thankfully we're in a good place right now.
I will just piggyback on that as well and say, we did not get approval from our regulators either to bank these, but we had their understanding that we are going to do it and they will work with us through the process. And that is for DFS and the NCUA. Everyone was aware prior to us banking these accounts. And like Michael said, we do monitor every single transaction to ensure the regulators know we are on top of these accounts.
And
But also on the flip side, right, I think everyone would agree is that to get a cannabis accountant, to specifically with 280E issue and stuff like that, to make sure that compliance is starting from the beginning at the operations level before it even moves on to the bank, that having a cannabis accountant understand those separations and understand that, because auditing is going to be a huge part of being compliant. And, all the transactions need to be tracked. So I think that's also really important to note, is that make sure you guys get a cannabis accountant to, start that process and work with someone that understands those regulations. So on to the next thing would be, what kind of financial institution this came in, and should they be looking for, and what kind of products and services can they expect?
you can take that one. I think the first is obviously any client, and whether you're shopping for any product, know what you're looking for, understand what and who is offering those types of products. You reach out, see how personable they are. You're working within a very limited industry right now. Not a lot of financial institutions, even within our own market area, are offering this product for those types of clients. Secondly, it's also the type of interaction that you want to have with those clients. Specifically with Ponce Bank, us being community bank, we build relationships with the clients. So we don't just have, simple communications via email or have a send in documentation. We like to have actual conversations with our clients. We need to understand who they are, and we want them to understand who we are as well. As far as, products and services, that can vary and differ based off the risk appetite of any institution, dependent on what they want to offer those clients, whether or not you want to restrict, say, mobile deposits or restrict remote deposit capture. There are institutions that restrict international wire transactions, for instance, right? Because logistically or practically speaking, why would, if everything's got to happen in-house, in-state, why is that client sending an international wire overseas, right? And that, that transitions to the AML, or anti-money laundering, and BSA side of the house. So your products and services can range from them being very standard and being treated as any other client, right? You're going to have your online and mobile banking, you're going to have mobile deposits and cash courier pickups, etc., to having some services that may be restricted based off certain prohibitions from regulations.
Got it. Anybody else to add to that?
I'll just say on the products and services, being that it is still federally illegal, you will run into some issues with like MasterCard and Visa. They will decline transactions if they think it's for cannabis. We've seen that happen with a lot of our businesses that have the word cannabis in their account name. We'll see transactions be declined that way, and through bill pay, things like that. Just because it is still federally illegal, not everyone is on board with products and services we can offer.
Got it. So as applicants are filling out, their forms and stuff like that, what are they going to be required to present when they're applying for business banking for cannabis?
I'll chime in on that one. Part of the requirement, again, and kind of falling in line of cannabis business or any other business, all financial institutions are required to comply with anti-money laundering regulations and expectancies. So we do have to perform our levels of due diligence. So you want to show up, articles of incorporation, showing that your organization has been structured, it's registered with the state, copy of your license with the OCM, or a copy of your application to the OCM and any communications you've had with them. You may want to come in with your business plan and your financials. Tax returns, again, certain institutions will ask for a variety of documentation. We do attempt to make it as painless as possible, but we do have to perform our due diligence and vet not only the entity, but the clients themselves as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if any of you guys had an account for another type of business, right, you're going to compare this to that onboarding, and the level of due diligence is through the roof with these. As we've discussed, this is illegal federally, so we have to go above and beyond what we do for any other customer. It's not like opening an account for a gas station. We have to collect a number of documents, and each one of our institutions here, we probably collect 90% of the same documents, right? There may be some a little bit more here, maybe a little bit less there, but overall, there are certain requirements that we need to have. We need to understand who the beneficial owners are, the source of funds for setting up these businesses. And we need things like licenses, license applications. The license application is actually a big thing because FinCEN actually mentions it in their regulations, right? We have to see a license application with the state that you guys are applying, and after the fact, then you get your license, and we need to check that too. So there are a number of checks. I know it seems like a lot, however, it's just we do all this up front so that we can continue a relationship down the road, right? We don't want there to be a situation where regulators come in and shut down our programs, and then you guys are left scrambling looking for new banking relationships. We take these steps up front so that we can turn around and show regulators, look, we've done above and beyond what we need to do so that we can be sure these customers are legitimate and they're running a legit operation. And then, as I've said, we've been through a few of these exams, and I'm sure the other two institutions have been through exams as well, and they're continuing to operate because they're doing it correctly. So don't view it as we're going crazy asking you for all these things because we're suspicious of you. We just need to make sure that we can maintain this program by showing the regulators that we've done our due diligence.
And I definitely appreciate that candor. And I will say that clients, even clients outside, our clients outside of the cannabis industry, can get a bit anxious or impatient about that process, but it is required. It is legally required, and the banks are just doing their job generally inside the cannabis industry. Given what Michael just said about how intense the AML diligence is and the rest of the filtering that they do, my recommendation is, consider, we typically don't get involved as legal counsel at that juncture. It's usually pretty straightforward, but to the extent that they're doing a deep dive into information or data or other disclosures that you might be uncomfortable with for whatever reason, talk it through with an attorney to help to get them help you disclose it to the bank in a way that you're comfortable with and a way that satisfies the bank's requirements.
Got it. So, taking that, then if that's the case, and this is for the people who are generally applying, so should they be, in order to start the process, should they already be applying to the OCM, and that's what's required as part of it, not before that? Is that will that be a requirement for you guys in terms of application? When do they start the process? Is it when they're already applying for the license?
Well, I can jump in here. I think because, as I said, we started about 3 years ago, so we have a lot more customers who are kind of in this application phase. We took on a number of entities in New Jersey, for example. It was a requirement to even apply to have a bank account. So we were banking entities that are going to get into the industry that hadn't even applied yet because it is a requirement, as I said. So we do have quite a few customers that came to us before the application was even submitted. In New York, we have customers that we call them hopefuls, right? The accounts are set up in a way we don't require the same level of due diligence at the onset because, again, you're applying for it. You don't have a lot of the documents that we would require to be a fully fledged tier 1 entity, cannabis entity. You wouldn't have your license, you wouldn't have your application yet completed, right? So we open the account with the knowledge that later on you will go through the full onboarding process where you submit all these documents. We also understand that a lot of these hopefuls or applicants need a bank account for things like paying their lawyers, paying the consultants, paying the OCM. So we're aware of that, and we kind of set this up so we can give you guys an account in order to do those things and be able to get the business off the ground, because we understand it's not just about when the business is operational. You need to have a foundation. We wanted to be able to provide a foundation to you guys when you're applying for the process. So the level of due diligence on those type of accounts are a little less. We still do require a little more than a normal business. However, we do understand that people need a bank account before they get licensed.
Okay, understood. So from that, what do you have to pay more for a cannabis bank account versus a regular business banking account? So that's a lot of questions that people have come up to me. They're like, why is it more expensive? Or, why are the fees more expensive? Things like that. So anybody can help with that
Uh,
question.
The always the touchy subject of bank fees and how financial institutions are known as horrible for their fees. The majority of bank accounts are always subject to fees. I mean, even retail accounts, right? If you're overdrawn or you have to pay an overdraft fees. For commercial accounts, you know, you have your standard cash strap fees and ACH fees, etc. I think part of it is individuals on the back end, you know, they don't really understand sometimes, you know, the resources it takes for financial institutions just in general, right? The individuals working in compliance, the individuals working in deposit services, the people working in operations, loan servicing for that matter, risk management. You have these back end individuals that are performing back end functions. So, you know, the bank does have to recoup some operating fees on the back end. The cannabis fees admittedly have been a little predatory out there for certain individuals, and it's quite unfortunate, really. There have been institutions that have attempted to take advantage because, again, it's that supply and demand. You're working within a limited space, so they are going to try to bang someone over the head just because they're a cannabis account or they're pre-licensed, or, you know, as Michael mentioned, a hopeful. And, you know, for someone that says is an applicant or a hopeful, you're not in operations yet, you don't have your license yet, but a bank's going to try to charge you $1,500, $2,000 or $3,000 a month just because you may be a cannabis account. And you're not pulling any income in, you're not pulling anything to your account, but yet, you know, the fees are there. The reasonable institutions, you know, tended to shy away from that, right? They try to make it competitive. Where are you paying slightly more? Yes. How much more? Again, that can vary. And the reason why is, you know, we opened up the conversation with the amount of due diligence it takes on the back end. Michael alluded to the due diligence, Bart alluded to the due diligence that banks have to do, including ourselves. And it's not just from the onset, that's continuing due diligence. So when Michael alluded to the fact that, yes, we have to monitor each and every one of the deposits, right? Seed to sale, it's that big term that was going around. And we have to see all of that. We have to hire individuals for that. You know, it takes resources in order for any institution in order to build up this type of program. Now, the flip side of that is obviously you can fund other areas of the bank and grow a stronger operational department, a stronger compliance department, a stronger cannabis driven department within the financial institution that can also lead to additional funding opportunities for the bank with increasing capital, et cetera. So, you know, it's just not a very simple yes answer.
Thank you for that. Anybody else have anything to add that?
I think, again, that as we see the federal regulations hopefully start to loosen, I think you're going to see a lot more competition in this area, and those fees will start, as Jason alluded to, will start to become, you know, more competitive and come down to closer to, you know, a normal commercial operation that's not so heavily regulated. So fingers crossed that you know, those federal laws start to move towards something that's more amenable to what these companies are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and just the last thing here on fees, if there is a financial institution charging, you know, tens of thousands of dollars a month for the relationships, right? They're obviously not in it to bank the industry, right? They're in it to make their few bucks and get out. They don't really care what's happening. A number of the institutions that, you know, we've been in touch with, we understand we're trying to help the business grow, the industry grow, right? We understand, especially with social equity clients, right? They're not flush with money. They're starting off from the bottom, and we're trying to help the process, right? Of course, as Jason said, there are fees, and the reason being we have to maintain the relationship. We have to do things on the back end. And as long as everyone is understanding of what's going on here, you know, we obviously listen to the customers and try and hear them out. We have different fee structures based on the type of entity you are, for example, right? Dispensaries, cultivators, processors, there's different levels of due diligence and requirements on our end, and we take that into account as well. And we also take into account the setup of the industry, right? If you're a small social equity client, you would probably be viewed differently than a large MSO. So we take all that into account, and you know, our financial institutions here, you know, I've been in discussions with Jason before about cannabis, and you know, we're here to help the industry grow, right? We're not here to make money off you guys. We're trying to grow it to benefit all of us.
And I'll just pick back on that real quick. We just getting into this industry. I have changed our fee schedule a few different times because we are not into this to make a profit. We are here to help bank those that need it. And we are trying to make this work for the business and again, to cover our costs because it is costly on the back end to monitor these accounts.
Yeah, great, thank you. So how long is the process to get an application through in general, just for your experience in the industry at this time? How long is the typical process for an application?
I would say for us right now, the process from beginning to account opening is usually anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how long it would take the business to gather the documents that we're requiring.
Yeah, I would say similar time frame, 2 to 4 weeks. You know, if all the documents are provided up front, and that's why a lot of us are here to kind of educate the customer base, right? Let you guys know what we need going in ahead of time, right? So if you're coming to us and you don't know you need a cannabis license application to be provided, you know, it'll slow the process down. You'll have to go to the state, get it, pull it out, bring it back, right? It could delay the process. So if you guys are aware of things ahead of time, you know, between 2 and 4 weeks, there should be an easy enough turnaround if everything's there and there's nothing unusual that comes up. But we're kind of on that same timeline.
And I'll third that one. Echo the same thing. You know, it's dependent on how quickly can the client provide the documentation that we're requesting. And aside from that, you know, once we start receiving, again, we like to have our conversations with our clients, and which is in-house, and having the team on the back end reviewing all those documents for due diligence, and that takes time in itself. So yeah, roughly right around 2 weeks or so.
Great, thanks. And is there a limit to how many applications a bank will accept at this time? So there, you know, some people I know were like, I think, for example, Valley, I don't know if you guys there was like because a lot of people have been going to you and stuff like that. Are you limiting how many people are coming in at this time or things like that? Or how do you make that determination?
It all comes down to bandwidth, right? We don't limit the number of applications. It just kind of depends. If you get 1,000 customers coming at once, it makes it a little bit more complicated, right? It's not that we're, you know, denying accounts. It's just more, maybe it'll take a little bit longer depending on what's going on. So we want to be there for the community and provide access to banking. And us being a national bank, right? I think it's advertised a lot that we're out there. So we do get a lot of inquiries. We're obviously trying to keep up with the demand, so we're adding people. So hopefully we can keep up with the demand and get anyone who comes to us, get them an account. You know, may take a little longer, might take a little shorter, but we're trying to work with everyone in order to get these accounts open so that you guys can build your businesses.
Yeah, I think that can be also dependent on how long the institution has had the program in place as well. You know, word of caution for the institutions also is, you know, you don't want to necessarily open the floodgates either. There has to be a level of caution with risk management. You know, it has to be dependent on the risk appetite of the bank as well. When the examiners, and again, we have to deal with our auditors and examiners, they will question, you know, do you have the capacity to manage all of those accounts, all of those clients? If, say, you know, you're a brand new institution and you just began the cannabis program and you go from having none to all of a sudden having 50 to 100 clients, it's a lot to take on. Do you have the back end resources to do so? Do you have the monitoring in place to do so? Are your compliance teams trained well enough? Your risk management teams, your operational teams, et cetera? You know, as an institution is longer in the game and they're banking and offering these services, it gives them time also to take on additional clients. So while they may not outright say they're limiting the number of applicants or the number of clients, they will take caution with, you know, just like Michael said, you know, you have to be reasonable with how many you're taking on. You can't just bring on 1,000 in one shot.
Yep, great. So fees, how are the fees based? Is it per month, volume, typical fees? Does, you know, Michael, I know you had mentioned about starting up your business as you're pre-planning at this point, but there are no actual transactional sales at that point. So do the fees change? Are they lower for regular, does it convert later on when you start taking in cannabis transactions? Because right now, like, let's say you're just in that licensing period, so you're just paying accountants and third-party vendors and things like that, but they're not necessarily cannabis specific transactional fees. So how are fees generated and how are they based?
Yeah, there's usually an onboarding fee, obviously much lower when you're in a hopeful state. When you're going to a tier 1, they'll obviously increase due to the due diligence requirements. And then there'll be a monthly fee associated with that too, right? It all depends on the nature of your business. If you have 1 dispensary, if you have 100 dispensaries, right, there's different monitoring costs. So there's no typical fee, right? It all depends on the nature of your business. And we have a team of client specialists that handle that, right? I work on the compliance end, so I'm not one to really speak about the fees. You would deal with the business unit on that. But as I said before, there is a specific business unit just for the cannabis section of the bank, and each customer gets concierge banking, right? They'll have a client specialist assigned to just them to discuss fees, discuss what services they need, and work with them through the process, not just onboarding, but as time goes on, any needs that you may have, there is one person dedicated just to you and your account and the success of your business.
Great, thank you. Anybody else had anything else to add to that?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, please, after you.
Our fees are based per month as well. So we do have an application fee plus a monthly fee, and that is tiered based on what kind of license you have. And you are not feed until you have a license. So if we set up that account for you while you are obtaining your license, you won't pay anything until you actually get the license and it's converted to a specialty banking account. There are more fees involved based on wires and normal banking fees on top of those, but that's our general fee schedule.
Great, that's great. Jason, did you want to add?
No, and again, just to echo the same, I think the general consensus will be your standard monthly fee schedules, where, again, if you're really shopping, and this is more, the information for the consumer out there that is shopping and you are fee shopping, understand what the fees mean. Okay, have your conversations with your bankers and understand what they are. And in being out there, you do want to find something that's going to be competitive, right? Again, Michael alluded, you don't want to have those guys that are going to be charging you, for just having an account, right? Or exorbitant fees, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, even though you don't have that volume going on. And there is differential on the type of licenses that you have, and even if you're in the pre-licensing phase. And again, going back to the social equity clients that can't afford to have those fees coming out if they don't have any income coming in.
Great, thanks. So just to remind everybody, what are the types of payments that are currently accepted in cannabis on the retail side? Like cashless ATM, what are the debit card, ACH payments, what are the different types? And we know that credit cards are not because of the federal, but there have been, I guess, misconceptions because some processors are offering credit cards. So can you guys explain the differences of those and where credit cards play into that?
I'll start off. So the majority of what we see coming in is cash, especially since Visa and MasterCard shut down the cashless ATM network in December. There are other methods of payments. There are entities such as Hyper, AeroPay, Dutchie that offer these services. They're basically like, wallets where you're allowed to, load funds into a wallet or pay AeroPay directly, right? There's a wallet, so you pay them $100 if you go to the dispensary, right? You scan with the app and they debit, say, $90 from your AeroPay account, and then the payment is made from AeroPay directly to the dispensary, right? That way there's no direct credit card payment to the dispensary, right? So it's a little bit of a workaround. These systems have been set up and are currently operational. There isn't really this cashless ATM network anymore. They are trying to come up with methods in order to, eliminate cash at these branches, at these dispensaries, I should say, just because the inherent danger of cash, right? It's It's easier to take, right? It's easier to steal. It's a lot harder to keep safe, right? You have a dispensary with $500,000 in cash sitting in the back, and you're waiting until cash transport comes and picks it up, right? It's a risk for everyone involved. So the industry as a whole is trying to come up with ways in order to make cash less a big player in this industry, right? Cash for a very long time was used for everything. It was used for not only paying for product, but also paying vendors and things like that, mostly because the industry couldn't get bank accounts. And we're trying to create something here so that we can offer services to you guys so that you can cut checks to your landlord, so you're not paying him in cash, so you can pay the electric bill with a check or an ACH, and offer services like that. And I think that's what most of us in this financial institution are trying to do, right? We're trying to get the industry off the ground so it's not kind of operating in the shadows.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Sorry, I was on mute for a second. Yeah, that's definitely good to know. Just because I think people are just looking on how to make it safe. And that's the biggest issue that, as you can see in California and Colorado with the increase in robberies for retail locations, and then also, and just in general, overall, even in cultivation where people are robbing farms and things like that. So trying to come up with another way to receive money. So how will suppliers be paid then? Is it going to be done in cash, or will checks be allowed in your specific branches, in your specific companies? Will we be able to pay our suppliers via checks or ACH?
We're not limiting the ability to pay via check, ACH, or even wire transfer. Again, that's relying on the institution and what products and services are they willing to offer to their clients. Us specifically, we're offering an array of products and services because we understand it's a business you're running. You have to pay your vendors, you have to pay payroll, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure you don't want to pay your employees in cash. Cash itself is going to be an issue in terms of how much is being held. So you have some institutions that are partnering with armored courier services to offer pickups and drop-offs, to their locations for the clients. At times, I think also the public needs to understand the institutions can be limited by the products and services that are out there as it is, right? We just spoke about the credit card companies. Visa, MasterCard on the credit card side don't allow it, but you can use your debit card, right? Your bank sponsored debit card at a dispensary. Part of the issue is also, say, your armored courier services, where not every armored courier service is allowing it. We expect a lot of this to change with the hopeful federal legislation, decriminalization, et cetera. But until those things happen, not only is the banking space itself limited, you're at times working within a limited merchant space as well. And what can you offer or can you not offer? But you also have to understand that, yes, we want to be able to have our clients conduct normal transactions, day-to-day business.
Just one note on something Jason just said, which was a very good comment about payroll, and something that I think Vanessa said earlier. Absolutely critical to have a cannabis accountant in that scenario. With payroll, you're going to have withholding obligations as an employer, and you do not want to run afoul of those. So absolutely critical when you set up your payroll to have a cannabis accountant at your as a resource.
Yep, for sure. So that leads to I'm going to switch around some of the questions, but if there's no local branch, how do we get deposits to you? Is that something that you will be providing as part of your bank services, armored trucks, things like that? How does that work?
So we actually are contracted with a third party offering a cash courier service. They will come directly to the business, pick up the cash and bring it right to the Fed for us. It will never actually come to one of our financial centers. And then besides cash, we have remote deposit capture through our online banking for checks. So they'll be able to deposit any checks through our online banking up to certain dollar amounts, but So between the courier service and online banking services, there shouldn't be an issue making any kind of deposit with the financial centers.
Yeah, and similar to what Diana said, we bank cannabis entities in 27 different states. We have branches in 4 states. So we have contracted a number of cash transport entities. You will find that not every cash transport company will take cannabis cash. So that's another concern that you may have. We have worked with a few entities, and we will give you the information when you come to us, and we will set you up to discuss with them. Obviously, if they're social equity clients, right, we've kind of made a few deals to, they want the industry to succeed too, right? So they understand that you guys are starting off, and they'll work with you. We've made sure of that arrangement, and we've had no issues. I know there's a question on there, is it safe? We've had no concerns with our cash transport entities. Everything's been fine, and as Diana alluded to, her cash transport companies bring the cash directly to the Federal Reserve. We follow a similar pattern here. If you do have an account at Valley, you won't be using the branch network, right? It doesn't matter if there's a branch across the street. The way we set it up is so that we can vet the money, right? In order to do that, we can't have people coming into the branches, but we do offer these cash transport services in order for you guys to have the money collected safely. We don't want you guys walking around with tens of thousands of dollars under your arm either, right? It's not safe. So we set all that up for you. We want to keep it safe for everyone, and we offer next day availability once the cash is received. I know there's other financial institutions out there that put a hold on it for quite a bit of time. After the money is received at the Federal Reserve, you have next day access. That way everyone's safe and the money's available to you.
Got it. And then would that be something that it's a separate fee and on top of like the regular banking fees and everything like that, that courier service, is that something that they would the operator would work out individually with the courier service?
Yeah, the individual customers, they work it out, right? We don't tell them, you have to use this, that, and the other. We give them a few options, right? However, like I said, you may want to go with another entity. We have to do checks on these entities too, right? We can't just say, well, you guys can use whoever you want, right? If they're not allowed to go into the Federal Reserve, it's a bit of an issue. So there are entities that we have to go through vendor management and check to make sure that they're a good fit. And also we want them to be safe too. We don't want your money, being involved in robberies or anything like that, or any risk being brought to your business. So we take steps on our end. We give you a list of approved vendors, and then you guys individually can discuss, the setup. I know there's a question in there on how often deposits should be made, right? That's really up to you guys. We don't require that it has to be done every day, right? It's, if you're really successful, maybe you need to have it done every day, but in general, it's up to you guys, right? If you want to deposit weekly, bi-weekly, whatever you want to do, it's really up to you, but you would work with your client specialist to kind of go over that and figure out what works best for your business.
Yeah.
And just one last piece, we offer similar remote deposit capture services for check activity, right? Like I said, we don't really even want you going to the branch for anything, right? We do everything in the back office for you. You have a client specialist. Any needs you have their number, you have their email address, and you just contact them, right? Instead of going to the branch and dealing with a teller, you have your own person that'll give you that white glove treatment to help you with whatever you need.
And then if that's the case, what about withdrawals and things like that?
So cash withdrawals for, if you're running a dispensary, right? If you need cash, the Armored Car Service will bring that to you, right? You just put in a request through the portal. So you need, 10,000 in ones. You do a swap out of your change vault. If you have 10,000 in hundreds, you give them that bag, and they'll bring you, when they're doing their weekly pickup or whatever, they'll bring you your change order, and it'll be debited from the account, and just continue operating normally. All that is done through the cash transport portal. But if there's any requests or needs, because things happen, right? You can reach out to the client specialist, and we'll figure out a way to make whatever you need happen.
And I will say it's the same with us as well. You'll have one person you're working with that will know everything about your account, that can set up the cash transport services for you. If you need to do any other transactions, If you need to make a withdrawal, something that's not big enough to have the cash courier service come to you to do, we can make arrangements to have that done within a financial center as well. There is one other option that we've put out to a few of our businesses is smart safes. So you can purchase the safe to have on your property, and the cash courier service will come and empty that and bring that directly to the Fed too. But you do get access a lot faster depositing into the safe. So there's many different options. If anyone is interested in more information on those, I do have a contact for them.
Right. We do have everyone's contact information at the end of this so that, you know, if anybody needed to, because there was a question about it. Going back, do you guys suggest having an ATM on site for dispensaries, let's say for retail dispensaries? Do you suggest having that there, or because of the limited options?
You could, just from a, customer to customer perspective. The customer's customer may need to take cash out and make it convenient and safe for them to do so. It's a safety thing. So majority of dispensaries will have security inside anyway, or some level of security, or to make it safe for their clients. So, if depending on how much they're purchasing, if they do want to purchase it in cash, does the client or the client want, we don't want our own client coming into the bank with X number of dollars. Does the client or the client want the same thing? Right. So, we've seen them, and, that's an option. I have seen some institutions offer through potential third parties, where the same armor courier services may have ATM services as well, or those safe deposit services, or the virtual vaults, etc. There are vendors and merchants out there that work with the cannabis clients to set up their needs, similar to what Diane and Michael are doing in terms of us. Yeah, we assign you with a customer support specialist, and that's the only person you're generally dealing with, and we centralize everything. Yeah, we want to be able to offer all those products and services. Again, we're not trying to limit anything. So what's offered out there for other clients, we're attempting to offer the same for the cannabis clients.
Right.
Yeah, and can I just add a little piece to that too, though? I will say I've been to see a lot of dispensaries in my time doing this, right? We have to do site visits on locations like that. And I do see pretty much all of them having ATMs. The only piece I will say, and this might be only specific to Valley, I don't know. If you do have an ATM, it's been brought to our attention a couple of times that the dispensary owners want to own their ATM. That's something we're not going to be okay with, due to the fact, right? It's cash intensive business. You have an ATM. That's a pretty good way to launder money, right? If there's anything illicit taking place there, in general, we will not be able to take that type of business, right? We recommend you guys using a third party to do this. And as Jason said, right, there are cash transport entities that basically service all types of things, right? They'll do the ATM, they'll do the cash transport, they'll do the delivery of, the cash. And there's even some entities that'll do transport, right, of the product, not just the cash. They're obviously separate entities under the same parent company. However, there are entities that kind of service ATMs and do all that. So it's kind of it's up to you guys who your ATM contractors are. But Valley, if you guys have an idea that you'd like to have your own ATM, unfortunately it's not going to be acceptable to us here at Valley just because of the risk. We're not saying you'll do anything wrong. It's just we can't confirm that, right? And we need to be able to show the regulators that there's nothing unusual going on here. And if we can point to $1 million in sales for the year and $1 million in deposit, that makes a lot of sense. If there's money, not adding up, then it brings questions not only to us, but to the industry as a whole, right? And we want the industry to grow and to have fewer questions from regulators and from politicians and things like that. We want everything to be successful. And that's why we take that stance.
Okay, just quickly, we do have just a question. How do retailers usually obtain ATM machines, and is this something a bank can provide? And Michael, like you said, it was more of a third-party vendor that they have that people typically use. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's third-party vendors, and in New York, if you guys are DASNY clients, I believe the state of New York will kind of organize that for you. I can't remember the name of a number of them that I've seen, but there are contacts in the state of New York that would they would be able to put you in touch with them in order to provide services like that. I know that there are quite a few that offer these services, but that would be a question for maybe the OCM or DASNY if you guys are working with them.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to, we're time-wise, we're a little behind, but just quickly, how do we make sure we stay compliant? Is there software to do that? So is there any type of software? Do we then go, first of all, start off with a Cannabis accountant, but are there any other additional checks and balances that we would need to put into place as retailers that you would recommend?
I think some of it, comes directly from the state, right? Certain software that's being used, it might be regulated by the state. I know Pennsylvania, for example, they require you to use MJ Freeway for your POS system, and your seat to sale tracking is Metric or BioTrack, whatever it is, right? Certain states require certain things. I think New York, most of the DASNY clients are using LeafLogix or Dutchy, whatever it's going by now, for their POS system. But in general, most states will have certain recommendations of entities to use for your software in order to show and track these transactions, and to be provided in a format that the state can review so that they can be sure that the sales are being made in accordance with state regulations and laws.
Got it. All right, let's just move on quickly to cannabis capital funding. I know that's not going to be, we don't have too much time left on it, and I do want to get to the predatory lending, but so I'm not going to go through anything specifically on this, but any type of highlights for this and people looking for capital funding and financing, collateral, things like that. Could you use your own business as collateral? What are just kind of the highlights for this, like for capital funding that you guys can recommend?
I can chime in. This is a very difficult area for a lot of cannabis businesses at present. There's not a lot of institutional lenders out there, and those that are very precautious, and you face a lot of the challenges that we've discussed on this panel, and then some. Certainly, you should expect to put up collateral. Frankly, any business in an early stage is going to have to put up collateral, not only business collateral, but also potentially personal collateral. You may have to personally guarantee the loan and put up some personal assets as collateral to secure that loan. That is not uncommon for any early stage company. And that is kind of a good segue, if I can, Vanessa, into the predatory lending topic.
Of course, yeah.
Given the challenge that a lot of our clients are facing with respect to finding capital, they are going into the private sector, which can be a blessing and a curse. The individuals, just to be clear, individuals are also subject to anti-money laundering laws. They do have to do some diligence on you to comply with those, but not as rigorously as the institutions on the panel today. That being said, you may save a lot of time and fees in dealing with these folks, but they're going to probably take more on the yield. So, you can expect to pay a lot higher than prime on any loan in this industry. That is not necessarily predatory. If it gets unreasonably high, you're probably leaking into predatory territory. Trust your instincts on this one. If it's just ludicrously high, just like the fees that my co-panelists discussed on the commercial banking side, if the interest rate that you're being asked to pay a lender is ridiculously high, so much so that it would put you under within a year based on your projections, don't take the loan. You're going to have to negotiate something else, either with somebody else or with that prospect. The other thing we see sometimes is an overreach in what's called a loan to own scenario or model, where the lender tries to use their loan to sort of shoehorn their way into an equity position. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, as I think everyone knows, right now there are very strict state restrictions on ownership of these companies. If you apply as a social equity candidate, for example, you're not going to really be able to change your ownership structure very much without running afoul of those rules. So you have to be very cautious of that. And if you have a prospective lender that is proposing some sort of change of control upon a certain event, whether it's a default or otherwise, or basically taking a huge chunk of equity from your business, you're probably not dealing with a person that's sophisticated enough in this industry to do that kind of transaction with. So that's a warning sign for sure. Other warning signs are really, I really like this. What you put up here, this graphic. Those are all very good points. Again, trust your instincts, and certainly, we don't generally get involved as legal counsel at the loan application stage. Again, it's pretty straightforward. It may be a lot more intense, but once you get through that phase and you get a commitment letter, that's typically when we get involved, and that's typically when a lot of information exchanges hands and you really start to see the economic terms of your deal. Get an attorney involved. Not only will that attorney be able to help you avoid pitfalls, unreasonable provisions in your loan agreements, but they'll also they should know the market a little bit better to tell you that that's way out of whack with market, whether it's a high interest rate that they're trying to charge you, or they're overreaching on collateral or overreaching on equity. So those are, but again, I don't want anyone to have any to take away any misunderstanding. Any early stage company is a risky proposition, whether you're lending money to that company or you're investing money in that company, which basically is the same thing. But whether you're buying equity in the company or lending money to that company, it's a very risky proposition, and you can expect to have a significant give for that. Whether it's, again, a higher interest rate than you would pay for a normal commercial loan, or more collateral, or perhaps some terms that are economically favorable to the lender. It's just it's a high risk, high yield business right now. And again, especially given the federal tension with the federal laws, combine that with the early stage market, if you will, it's a mix for very economically favorable terms for lenders.
And do you see that happening often more and more in cannabis? Is that why I think you're trying to highlight that more? Is that happening a lot in this industry?
Yeah, so it's a real challenge. I mean, first of all, as we all know, it's been a bit of a nightmare in terms of the rollout here in New York State. So for the folks that haven't been licensed yet, it's really hard for them to raise capital, whether it's from an investor that's purchasing equity, or from a lender that's willing to make a loan to the company. It's a sticky proposition if you don't even have a license yet. But they still have operating costs. They still have to get their company ready to roll once they do get that license. So it's been a real challenge for our clients to raise capital, whether it's from an equity investment or a debt investment. But yeah, I do think that as we get closer and closer to, as more competition, just like the commercial banking side, as more competition comes into the market in New York, I think you'll see a lot of that start to ease up, and it'll become a little bit more flexible and feasible for the cannabis companies in New York.
Great, thank you so much. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to add before we close out the webinar? I did put up the contact information. If anybody else had any additional questions, they could put it in the Q&A and I can ask the panelists, but anything else that anybody wanted to add? No, great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us during this conversation. And this is the contact information for everybody. So if you'd like to reach out to them, we will be posting this onto our Canny YouTube channel. So look out for that. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.